We were taught that the government protects us and criminals destroy us, but history hides a terrifying paradox. Let's be clear, the Mafia is pure evil. They are murderers and parasites, and there is no room here for Hollywood romanticization. However, sometimes when the government abandoned its citizens to their fate, the ultimate public enemies came to the rescue. Today, we explore the documented cases where ruthless syndicates did more for the people than their own country. The lethal government experiment and the bootlegger saviors. In the 1920s, the U.S. government decided to force its citizens to stop drinking alcohol. When prohibition failed, the authorities took a monstrous step. Under secret orders, they began adding deadly poisons, like kerosene, chloroform, and benzene, to the industrial alcohol that bootleggers were repurposing for speakeasies. The goal was simple: scare the public. New York City's chief medical examiner, Charles Norris, begged them to stop, calling it a national experiment in extermination. Nearly 10,000 Americans died from this government-poisoned liquor. They went blind, suffered paralysis, and died in agony. So who saved the citizens from their own government's toxic brew? The Mafia. Syndicates built massive logistical networks, importing high-quality rum from the Bahamas and premium whiskey from Canada. Criminals armed with Tommy guns were literally supplying a safer product to the streets than the United States government. Public enemy number one feeds a starving nation. The mob didn't just save those looking for a drink. Fall 1930. America is drowning in the Great Depression. President Herbert Hoover is eating 7-course meals in the White House while claiming that federal relief would destroy the American character. Meanwhile, people are passing out from hunger on the frozen streets of Chicago. Then, a soup kitchen opens on State Street. The sign above the door reads, "Free soup, coffee and donuts for the unemployed." The owner, Al Capone. Mobsters in tailored suits fed hot soup to 120,000 people every single day. For Thanksgiving, Capone personally bought 5,000 turkeys for Chicago's poorest families. It was a cynical PR stunt right before his tax evasion trial. But for thousands of freezing people, Capone was the only savior while politicians in Washington just shrugged. The covert mob war on American Nazis. 8 years later, authorities turned a blind eye to a threat far worse than starvation. Late 1930s. Tens of thousands of German-American Bund supporters are legally marching across America. Led by Fritz Kuhn, they wear swastikas and praise Hitler right inside Madison Square Garden. The NYPD actually protects their rallies, citing the First Amendment. The government was paralyzed by its own laws. Out of desperation, New York Judge Nathan Perlman secretly called Meyer Lansky, the mob's financial genius. The judge asked for help with just one condition: no dead bodies. Lansky brought in ruthless hitmen from Murder, Inc., including Bugsy Siegel. Mobsters crashed the Nazi meetings. They didn't shoot. Instead, they shattered collarbones with baseball bats, tossed the speakers off stages, and threw stink bombs into the crowds. The Mafia did the dirty work the law forbade the state from doing. The U.S. military's desperate deal with the Godfather. If a judge calling a mobster sounds insane, wait until you hear what U.S. naval intelligence did. February 1942. The massive military liner SS Normandy mysteriously catches fire and capsizes in New York Harbor. The Navy is in full panic mode. U-boats are sinking ships just off the coast, and dock workers are constantly on strike. The military is convinced the ports are crawling with Nazi saboteurs. Naval Intelligence Officer Charles Haffenden does the unthinkable. He secretly visits Dannemora maximum security prison to make a deal with Charles "Lucky" Luciano, the godfather of the American Mafia. Luciano passes an order through his ruthless underboss, Albert Anastasia. The dock strikes end that exact same day. The ports go on strict lockdown, and Italian mobsters personally patrol the piers, hunting down outsiders. The U.S. government had officially hired organized crime to secure its borders. How the mob helped invade fascist Europe. The Mafia's cooperation didn't stop at New York's docks. Summer 1943. The Allies needed to invade Sicily, an island Mussolini had turned into an impenetrable fortress. Allied intelligence was flying blind. Once again, the U.S. government turned to Lucky Luciano. The American Cosa Nostra contacted their Sicilian brothers, notably the powerful Don Calogero Vicini. When American tanks rolled onto the beaches, they flew yellow flags with a black L, Luciano's insignia. The Sicilian Mafia provided the military with maps of secret mountain trails, guided soldiers through minefields, assassinated fascist snipers, and incited rebellions deep behind enemy lines. The invasion was so successful that in 1946, the U.S. quietly pardoned Luciano, commuted his 50-year sentence, and deported him to Italy as a thank you from a grateful nation. The ruthless syndicate that protected the outcasts. In peacetime, the government continued creating outcasts. In 1960s New York, being gay meant having a target on your back. The state banned them from gathering, fired them from jobs, and police conducted brutal night raids, viciously beating people up. The law had declared open hunting season on its own citizens. The Genovese crime family saw this as a goldmine. Mobster Fat Tony Loria paid off the local police precinct and bought a rundown bar, transforming it into the famous Stonewall Inn. The conditions were horrific. The mob watered down the drinks, overcharged at the door, and the bar didn't even have running water to wash glasses. Patrons were frequently blackmailed, yet the historical paradox is that this brutal criminal syndicate gave these people the only place in the city where they could dance and feel safe from the nightsticks of their own police force. The shadow mayor of a forgotten city. A similar power vacuum emerged in impoverished neighborhoods. In the mid-20th century, New York City effectively abandoned Black Harlem. Garbage piled up for weeks, infrastructure rotted, street crime ran rampant, and cops only showed up to collect bribes. This void was filled by Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, one of the most feared crime bosses in New York history. He was a ruthless killer, but to the locals, Bumpy acted as a state within a state. If a poor widow was being evicted, Johnson paid her rent. He handed out frozen turkeys from the back of trucks, paid college tuition for talented kids, and severely punished any outsiders who tried to rob the residents of his neighborhood. Bumpy Johnson provided order and a social safety net where the official government had long given up. The narco-terrorist who built a free utopia. Heading south, we find a criminal who literally built the cities while the government ignored extreme poverty. 1980s, Colombia. In Medellin, tens of thousands of people are surviving in the Moravia neighborhood, a massive city dump where families literally slept on mountains of rotting garbage. The government acts like they don't exist. Enter Pablo Escobar, the man who would eventually drown his country in blood. He launched the Medellin Without Slums program. Using cartel drug money, Escobar built an entire neighborhood of 780 solid brick homes with running water, electricity, and soccer fields. And he simply handed the keys to the poorest families for free. He provided free healthcare and planted trees. Escobar bought an army of devoted fanatics. That is exactly why the police and military couldn't catch him for years. To an entire city, the drug lord had done more than the president of Colombia. The billion-dollar citrus boom that birthed the Mafia. Why does the Mafia even exist? The answer lies in the origins of the world's most famous syndicate. Cosa Nostra emerged in 19th century Sicily, and not out of a love for crime. At the time, scurvy was ravaging Europe, making Sicilian lemons worth their weight in gold. The great citrus boom began, but when Italy unified, the government in Rome was too distant and too corrupt to protect farmers from massive waves of thieves. State laws were completely useless, so plantation owners started hiring gabolotti, tough, heavily armed locals. For a cut of the harvest, these men guarded the groves, tracked down stolen cattle, and dispensed swift, brutal justice. The Mafia was born as a necessary private security service, replacing an absent government. It was only decades later that this protection mutated into a violent, unstoppable, and parasitic racket.